Welcome, guys, back to the Grateful Living podcast. Today, I'm thankful to have Katie Southworth with me. Katie is an internationally recognized abstract artist. Her work harnesses the power of color and light to promote mindfulness, mental well being, and joy. Over 100 of her original works are in private collections in New York City, Vero Beach, LA, Edgartown, Hermosa Beach, Oakland, Denver, Canada, Slovenia, and many more places. Katie's work has been featured in international publications including House and Garden UK, Vanity Fair London, and British Vogue. Her first solo show, Colorjoy, at New Canaan Gallery and Frame, attracted over 300 people to opening night and 10 pieces sold in total. Katie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Arnav. It's awesome to be here. I'm a huge fan of your work and this podcast, so it's an honor.
I appreciate that. Appreciate hearing that. So, before we get started, just want to provide a trigger warning for anyone listening. We will be talking about suicide in this interview. So just, putting that warning out there. And then, Katie, for you as well, I just want to say, given the emotional nature of the podcast, obviously, if you need a break, you need time to cry or anything like that, obviously,
Thank you.
we can pause and things like that. And then, if I ask you something that feels like it's pushing you too much, just be like, I don't really feel like answering that.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So with that, Katie, for those of us that don't know you as well, kind of take us back to the beginning, where you grew up, your family situation, what type of kid you were, things like that.
Sure. So, yeah, I think I've spoken to Arnav about this before. I grew up what I thought was like I was a super normal kid, right? Um, I guess super normal, really lucky kid. I grew up with a brother and, the ability to play sports and art offered as a subject in my elementary school. So I was always really busy, really active, um, and a really close knit family as well. So I was a really happy kid, and I had absolutely no idea that anyone in my family, particularly my mom, was sick in any sort of way. But in fact, that was the truth that I wouldn't learn until I was actually 20 years old, that she battled a huge illness her entire life of bipolar depression. So I would describe my childhood as sort of a blissfully ignorant, happy, wonderful upbringing in Southern Connecticut. Probably would have defined myself as a gymnast, more of a student athlete all the way through high school and into college. And it wasn't until college that I really considered myself an artist. So,
Yeah. I'm curious, obviously there are going to be two elements, the art and then the mental health piece. I guess,
mhm.
for you, when did art become a part of your life? And do you remember your first memory?
I mean, I think art has always been a part of my life, but it's varied in terms of significance or importance, right? So I mentioned that it was available, as a special in my elementary school, right? So I think that first kind of sparked my interest, and then over the summers, I would, be known to kind of start painting on random things like rocks and shells and stuff, and I always kind of loved it as a little bit of a hobby. Um, but I think it wasn't until high school that, I had enough skills and I took a few classes that I really started to get, you know, it really interested, and I loved getting better at it. And I found that it was kind of the only time where I would kind of chill out because I was and still am like a really, really ambitious person. So I always had a full schedule. I was always, doing sports and that extra class and whatever. And art was sort of that thing that would slow me down and kind of work my brain in a different way. So I would say that I had definitely like a bug by the time I entered college, so much so that I was bold enough to put it on my schedule and continue studying it in college.
Yeah, awesome. And in the same vein, uh, you know, do you remember the first time you were like heard the word mental health or bipolar or things of that nature?
Sure. I mean, I knew that I wanted to be a psychology major in college because I think I lacked that as a source of understanding. Like I knew that mental health was a part of health. I knew that um, certain people had mental disorders, but I was more interested in sort of like positive psychology, I guess, going in, like what makes people work the way they do, what comprises our emotions and our behaviors, like where does it all come from? So, but yeah, I definitely think I first started learning about actually what it is. Definitely when I started to take a closer look at it in college.
Okay.
'Cause I certainly didn't know my mom was sick as a kid or
Okay.
anything about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I guess not to go right into it, but I mean, just to give context to the listeners, do you want to kind of tell us the story of your mom, tell us about her, and then, the events that unfolded in college?
Yeah, I mean, I love talking about my mom.
Mm.
My
Yeah.
friends and I talk about her all the time. I mean, she was just the most amazing human being. She was like super wacky. She was really excited all the time, mostly for other people. She was kind of known to be a mother to like everyone, like all my friends loved her, and to all of her friends, she was just sort of this light. She was like the light in the room, just always trying to cheer you up or talk about your day in a genuine way. Like when she asked you how you were, she meant it.
Yep.
um, she like was super talkative and whatever. So everyone just knew her as this like full of life person. Um, but that was the side of her that she sort of presented to the world. And she lived in a lot of darkness kind of by herself. Obviously, not many people knew about that. And I didn't even either until I was 20. Um, and that was when sort of another family member of ours sort of started struggling with a mental disorder, and we didn't really understand it. So I would say that's the first time that I learned that bipolar was partly genetic. And at first, there was a twinge of anger in there because I was sort of feeling a little bit uninformed about my own health records, I guess, my own health history. Um, but yeah, that was fall semester of my junior year of college when I learned that she was ill. And unfortunately, that was the beginning of sort of a pretty big rabbit hole for her. She had a challenging year. Um, and then, you know, 8 months later, she was gone. I just got a phone call. Um, and it was just, I don't want to say that it was completely out of the blue because everyone knew how much she was in a bad place at that time. Um, but of course, I mean, anyone that's been through this will tell you that it's a smack in the face, and your whole entire life changes in the blink of an eye. Um, and almost the worst part is you'll never really know 100% why, 100% of what they were thinking, what was in their head. All you can really know is it wasn't really them thinking, and
Yeah.
that's the tough part is that it was another part of their chemically imbalanced brain talking,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the only thing that we can all know to be true. So yeah, that was August of 2015, and yeah, and as with anything, I mean, the same is true today. Life just sort of goes on. So that was a week before my senior year, and my brother happened to be at the same university as me, so we both went to Colby College, and we both decided as a family that we would go back to school on time. Me to my senior year, him to his sophomore year, and we just sort of move like lived on. Moved on is not the right word. She's always here. It is my story, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um, but we didn't feel any need to sort of pause life, if you will, because you can't really do that. So yeah, that's kind of the short version.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I guess you get this information fall of your junior year.
Mhm.
Um, you know, the question people always like to ask, and I don't know if it's the right question, but
Mhm,
did you guys feel like there were signs, you know, before that August date, maybe a month before or a week before, was she, you know, apologizing about things? Was she, were there any signs that felt like that, you as family members look
mhm,
back on, um,
mhm.
yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think we always knew that she was kind of different than other moms. I mean, because she didn't just struggle with depression; it was bipolar depression, right? So she would have these really amazing high highs, and then that we saw those, but she tended to sort of hide away when she was in those low lows. Um, that point at which I found out she was ill, not really. I mean, she had moments of like being short or maybe a little bit irritable or maybe a little bit quiet. But I always just sort of thought of that as just mom being mom. She was just, uh, that was just her. And knowing that she was ill didn't really change anything about the way I behaved with her or interacted with her. It just was sort of a different layer of understanding as to why, as to where those behaviors may or may not be coming from. And it's kind of tricky to separate the two. Like, is this just your personality, or is this part of what you're battling or you're struggling? So that's, I think that's a common hardship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, getting the news and then, that initial week after, um, you kind of described it as, life, continues and things like that. So that gives me some idea that you might have just compartmentalized, you
Mhm.
know, eh, I guess f I don't know if there's any advice to give, but, as you look back on that time period, if,
Mhm.
if unfortunately someone else is going through this where they've lost a parent to suicide, is there anything that you look back on as, I should have done this, I should have taken a longer break, I should have done like, does anything come to mind in that sense?
Sure. And I've actually had a couple people call me, to say, "Oh my God, this happened to me or a family member or a friend. Like, what do I do? Or how do I help them?" Um, and it is correct that you'll never be able to. Every experience is super different for everybody. So I always kind of start those phone calls with, "Look, this is a totally unique experience to you. This is your tragedy. This is your trauma. This is your experience. Mine, even though on paper it might, have the same word in it, suicide, it doesn't mean that, we've been through anything similar." But I will say that I think the one thing I was told when I was going through it that I don't think I listened to well enough, and it was probably because I didn't understand how to do it well enough, is to do something for yourself each day. And that doesn't necessarily mean taking a month, 2 month, 3 months like break from everything. I think that that's sort of a common thing that people might think like, oh, she just went through this. She must be, you're pausing everything for a while. Um, Not necessarily. I don't think that is helpful. I think what is helpful is perhaps, yeah, go on with your life, continue your day to day, but maybe take that 15 minutes, an hour, a couple hours to go on that walk, go to the gym, meditate, pray, whatever it is that gives you peace. Or maybe it's just going into a closet and crying your eyes out for an hour. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to be socially appropriate. It doesn't have to resonate with anyone else except for you. Um, and that's a big ask. Like, it's a learning curve in itself, you know? And I think mine, uh, was lucky enough to be sort of already in my lap a little bit. It was painting. But I didn't know that it was painting. It sort of, manifested that way for me just by nature of I literally, I had it on my schedule that fall when I went back to school. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's the only thing that I would say actually helped me. It wasn't any card or flower or phone call that someone gave me. It was someone saying to me, a really good friend who I talk to every year, said, when I originally called him and told him the news, he said, "What have you done for yourself today?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, my whole family's grieving. I got to be there for them. I got to." And he was like, "No, no, no. What's the one thing you're going to do for yourself today?" And yeah, I wish I had known how to do that that week.
Yeah.
It probably would have helped.
Yeah. You mentioned friends. Is there anything that you would recommend, um, friends or even family do, in a situation like that? Because obviously, they have no relatability. And then, as you said, everything's individual. But as you look back on it, um, is there any advice you would give to friends or family on supporting someone that's lost someone, to suicide?
Um, I think just showing up. And that doesn't mean show up and say, "Hey, how you must be sad. How are you feeling?" No, it's just showing up and just reminding them that you exist and that you care about them. Because I think the most painful thing about losing someone to suicide is you struggle with this abandonment type thing, and that definitely persists. Like, I'm always scared of being left, again, by anyone, by a pet, by a friend,
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
a teacher. Like, it always sucks whenever you lose someone, I think, or at least that's my experience. Whenever I lose someone, in any sense of the word, whether it being like an experience ends, or like I quit my job recently, like losing those coworkers every day, like you get that little trigger. So I think, you know and I had a lot of friends do that for me, and it's funny, they weren't necessarily close at the time. Like, they were friends, like old childhood friends that we had sort of fallen out. But once that whole thing happened in my family, they just sort of like started reaching out once, like every once in a while, not necessarily to talk about it, not necessarily to talk about the loss or my mom, but just to be like, "Hey, I'm here. I see you. I We exist. Our relationship exists," and that's helpful. Just knowing that people are out there thinking of you. So it's like as simple as like sending someone a funny picture or sending someone a meme or a fun video. It's just
Yeah.
showing up.
Yeah. You talked about having to make the decision to go to school the next
Mhm,
week. And, you know, when I said compartmentalize, in a positive manner, in the sense that you had to, in order to keep moving forward, you kind of had to do that.
mhm,
I'm curious, like, as you look back on that process, obviously college is a time period where people, as a whole, are living carefree without much, you know, a huge conscience, and so, you know, eh, whether it's school or it's, they go back to work, 2 weeks later, was there some, I guess, some way that you were able to help with that transition to, this major thing has happened in your life, but you
mhm,
have to like be in
mhm,
normal society?
mhm. Yeah. It's tricky. I think the two things that were essential to me being able to do that were two things. But again, it's sort of funny how lucky I got with these, because I didn't necessarily set them up in anticipation that I would need them. But the two things were, I had a single, so I lived in my own room, so I had a place to go and just be however I wanted to be.
Yeah.
If I needed to spend a whole day under the covers watching Netflix, I did that. If I needed to just like, I don't know, breathe I had that alone space. Because being alone and feeling lonely are two extremely different things. And I don't think I felt lonely, but having that alone time was important. Um, and then I thought the second thing would be my swim team. And that definitely helped. Don't get me wrong, like having that whole entire team of support, having that exercise every day, having that just sort of a new goal to focus on, whatever. But it was actually painting. And I didn't know that it would be that. And I think it, again, was another moment where I could just sort of be alone with my thoughts, and not only alone with my thoughts, but away from my thoughts to be externalized, to put literally on paper and in front of my face. And that was what sort of helped me process this ridiculousness that I was being asked to do, process a whole new life essentially, and kind of wrap up this career of mine, my collegiate career. So yeah, that was, so I guess the commonality in those two things is, again, sort of that alone time. And I think it might be an interesting piece of advice to give, like, oh, when you lose someone, like, go spend some time alone.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that doesn't sound good.
yeah.
Um, but actually, I think it was more imperative than even I realized at the time. Because I think you need to be confronted with how you're actually feeling without any other, social things going on, to understand what you actually need to continue healing. You gotta listen to yourself somehow. So
This is not a fair question to you, so feel free to not answer. But there's a chance that, when this gets published, that a parent who is
mm,
dealing with mental health troubles
mm,
listens to this and hears, a parent with kids hears, you know, you speaking,
mhm,
if they're contemplating suicide, is there something you would say
mm.
to them, having experienced, the other side of that?
That is a good. That's a really hard question, and it's a hard question because um, there's a certain barrier to how much they'll even be able to hear you. You know?
Yeah, and as we said, obviously,
Yeah.
the voices in their head
No,
aren't
I think
them.
it's exactly. So it's
Yeah.
difficult, but I suppose assuming that they might be able to hear me. Um, I don't know. I would probably just offer that they're not alone. You know,
Yeah.
like, even though they might be feeling completely and utterly alone and helpless and whatever, and this is the entire point of why I'm talking to you this
Yeah,
evening,
and
is
yeah, and
literally to put forth that, like, this is so common. Like, all you have to do is throw a stone or, like, breathe, and your breath will, like, land on someone who is also probably maybe struggling with something along the lines of, so
yeah,
I guess, yeah, that they're not alone, and if they just, you know, ask and they shall receive friendship, love, support.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, did you deal with any feelings of guilt?
You know, a little, but that's such a good question because, and I feel really lucky with this one because I had so much amazing support, not only with like family and stuff, but also with my own it sounds even silly to say, but like with my own intellectual education, like I studied this. Like it was actually extremely ironic. Right after she passed away, the next class on my schedule was abnormal psych. So I literally, like, right after she died, had a deep dive course into like abnormal psych, and one of the diseases that we were to study was bipolar disorder. So that was a little tough. Talk about like tough questions and timing. Like, that was a little bit much
Yeah,
I almost dropped that course. It was almost too much, but I
yeah,
decided to open myself up bravely to all that new information, and it really helped. I mean, it really did. So I kind of am grateful that I was kind of smacked in the face with all that information, even though it was tough to hear. It was necessary to hear because it taught me too absolutely rid any possible feelings of guilt when they do show up, because they will show up. Like it's almost impossible, I think, personal opinion, that going through something like this, that you won't ever feel some version of guilt. Um, and that's okay. You know, it's not a problem that it shows up. It's a problem if you let it consume you and you believe it. So, the whole "you are not your thoughts" thing is, I guess, the most important thing to carry away from that. Because guilt is normal as a feeling. But learning how to sort of be like, hey, you're a feeling, you showed up. Thank you for being here. I'm going to put you aside now because that's not true.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously it's been some time, over 6 years now.
Mhm.
For you, um, you know, I guess, uh, does time help? Have you gained new perspective? Do you look at it differently? Or I mean, obviously the wound never goes away, but, um, I guess how has it been, as the years go on?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because you're right. It never does leave you, and it doesn't get better. Like people will always tell you, like, oh, it gets better, it gets better, it gets better. It doesn't. You get better. You just learn to live with it better. You learn to develop new skills. You learn how to process it further. So I think my art helps me the most with that. The more I can paint, the more I can be creative and figure out these ways to, combat darkness with my art. Sort of the more I can almost like feel her energy, like feel her legacy. Um, so that really helps. Um, but yeah, the years do go by and you do get stronger, but I don't think it'll ever go away. And I say this all the time to people, like the hardest parts are in the really, really bad moments and the really, really good moments. The really, really good moments almost hurt more because, when something good happens, what's the first thing you want to do? Pick up the phone and call your mom, tell her what happened. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so that will never stop stinging,
yeah.
like in full force. So
Uh,
just got
This is another tough question, but curious if you have any advice for, um, you know, people dating someone who have lost a parent, to
hmm,
suicide. Um, you talked a
uh,
little bit about abandonment,
right.
but does you know, as we said before, the other person's never gonna get it and never gonna understand that. But is there, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like it could be as simple as don't complain about, your mom or something, like I don't even know, but like is there something you look at that you would recommend, people entering into relationships, you know,
Yeah, I mean, I that's a really good question. I've been through. I was in a relationship when my trauma happened, and that relationship ended, and I'm in a new one now. And I think I would just I think transparency is the key. You know, and it's a two-way street, right? So the person who's experienced it, like it's on you to be at a point with yourself where you're comfortable enough to talk about it. Because if you don't talk about it, it will bring up issues that will be hard to explain with any other thing. So and that, again, that's a big ask. Like it's a lot of self-learning, it's a lot of confidence building and skill building, but I think the more you can be upfront about what you've been through, what hurts the most, uh boundaries is like what you said, like tell your significant other that it bothers you to talk about parents, or for some people it might be, hey, I love talking about parents, like tell me more about your parents. And it's super personal. Um, but yeah, it's a tough one because yeah, that abandonment fear is probably in there somewhere, and that's really hard to grapple with in a relationship. So um, establishing trust is probably the most important thing, probably the first major thing to establish, and that takes a lot of time too. So I don't know. I guess to sum it up, I would say just some keys: transparency, trust, and patience.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to, talk about, with your life, experience and knowledge, whether thoughts on grief, you know, what to do on the toughest days, or, I mean, especially, I didn't ask that, but like, people in your
Mhm.
situation,
Yeah.
um, that it might have happened recently that their parent passed, like,
Mhm.
is there something that you would tell them about this whole process and continuing with life?
That it's gonna be super unique to them, and it's gonna be up to them to figure out their own best path forward, because you can read as many books as you want, you can listen to as many podcasts as you want, you can, and that's all good, do all that stuff, try out different methods, listen to what other people have done and try it out for yourself, but at the end of the day, it's gonna be a trial and error process until you find something that works for you, and you've gotta learn how to be selfish, and I'm going to use that word in a positively framed way in this situation. I hate that selfish is framed as this bad word. You've got to be a little bit selfish when something like this happens to you. You have to put yourself first. You've got to take care of yourself in any form that makes sense to you. And again, that it is allowed to be something that doesn't make sense to anyone else. In my situation, it was doing abstract art, and this year that manifested in quitting my job to do abstract art full time. That's what makes sense for me.
That's awesome.
That's what makes me feel the most healthy, the most connected to her and her legacy and my vision and my hope for the future, for others, for health, for everything. And it might not be easy, it might not be, the advice everyone would give me, but it's what makes sense for me, so I listened to it and I did it, and I'm not looking back. So
Yeah. I guess the final question on this that I would ask is, obviously, um, you have, your father and brother,
mhm,
and, this is an interesting time of the year, the holidays and things like that. And I'm sure, like,
it's a tough one.
the first Mother's Day was extremely tough. I guess in terms of the family dynamics, um, is there a way to, I don't even know, but, or does it just get better over time, or do you have like a
it
traditions? Or,
honestly, my this is gonna sound like tough love, but it's a true one. Let go of your traditions. Like, if you want to stay in pain, like, ex- look forward to your tradition. I guess the crux of it is everything is going to change, and that's okay. Change is good. Newness is good. Looking at traditions that are broken or dynamics that are broken or changed as, oh, this awful, horrible, sad thing, is not going to help you. It's not going to help you grow. Even if they do change and it's upsetting, it's you're just going to have to accept it as being part of it, and either look for the silver linings, or do something else. So I mean, I it's as simple as, framing it positively or starting new things. Like, when I the first summer, or sorry, excuse me, the first Christmas that my mom was not around, I started my own new traditions, and one of them was making these candied cranberries by myself every single year. I just finished making them literally an hour ago.
yeah.
And it's my new thing that I get to be in control of. There's nothing, no one that can take that away from me, unless like every supermarket in America within like 50 miles of me is somehow sold out of cranberries and sugar. I'm making my candied cranberries every Christmas. So again, there's that selfish thing again. Like, you got to find something that works for you, that you can look forward to with holidays and new traditions and new family dynamics. Um, in my case, my family actually got bigger. My dad remarried, so we have I have a stepmom now and two new step siblings. And, you know, sure, maybe it was a little bit different and perhaps at times uncomfortable at first, but if you can frame it as, hey, now there's more people in my life that I get to love, and that's good. So I think it's a matter of reframing and starting new things that are good that you can control. Um,
Yeah.
that all sounds really easy to say. I know that. And they were by no means easy to do when I was doing them, and I still do them. Um, but yeah, I guess that would be my advice.
Yeah. And, I lied. I have one more. But before we transition to your art,
Sure.
I'd love to just, if you could share, for those of us that didn't know your mom, maybe your most
Hmm.
positive memory of her, or like something that we can all take, so her spirit can hit us all, as well.
Man,
Um,
that's such a good one. Uh, I don't know if I can pin it down to just one thing, but I think the biggest thing that shows her is she, like I said, I grew up in gymnastics, like major travel, huge gymnast, and I had a ton of gymnastics friends. We would travel all over the country together at meets and everything. And my mom was a gymnast too, right? So it was like our biggest shared thing. Every single meet, she was the loudest voice in the crowd. And it wasn't just during my routines, it was during everybody else's routines, to the point where she'd be cheering on a teammate of mine and somebody else, a stranger in the crowd, would congratulate her. Like, oh, congrats on your daughter's success. And
yeah.
like their actual parent would be like, actually, that's my daughter. Like she was just the most enthusiastic, loving cheerleader of everybody else. Like all she wanted to do was celebrate and cheer on other people. I mean, she was kind of similar in the way to like, how comedians are always trying to make other people laugh. She had that same, focus. It's everybody else first, kindness first. I mean, she was just the nicest human there ever was.
That's awesome. Yeah. Cheer for everybody. That's a good spirit to share. Uh,
Precisely.
yeah. So, and obviously now today, you're a full-time artist. So, there's people that are going to want to hear about that journey as well. So tell us, you're going through, this happens right before your senior year. You're an
Hmm.
art major at Colby.
Hmm.
What's your, mental attitude at the time? Was it something that you were dreaming of, being in this position where you are today, or like what was your attitude at the time?
Not at all. I remember at the time, because in college everybody asks you what you want to do for your career, your job, whatever. And I would always say something along the lines of, well, I have no idea what my career is going to look like, but I know exactly what my retirement is going to look like. My retirement is going to be me, making paintings casually on the side, like maybe selling them here or there, whatever. I always thought it would be sort of a later in life endeavor of mine. But the trauma I went through sort of expedited this realization that I think was always going to be inevitable, which is that no, you are centrally an artist. Like this is your main form of expression, your main form of interpreting the world and sharing a vision with others. Um, so it was weird the way it expedited that for me. And at the time when it happened, I was only a psych major. I wasn't even supposed to be an art major. That semester that I went back to, the first semester of my senior year, my advisor told me I only needed one more class and I could be a double major, a studio major as well. And I was like, oh, that'd be kind of cool. Like, whatever, may as well go for it. And they said, okay, well, if you're going to be a studio major, you'll also have to do a senior exhibition. And I was like, oh, like, at this time I was not making any work that I thought was even remotely presentable at all. My work was suffering, if you will, in a way. But it was also really incredible the way that my trauma also sort of clarified. It sort of like cleared the picture of like I had this realization of what I wanted to focus on with my art. Like all the confusion about my paintings went away, and I was like, oh, I know exactly. Like I'm gonna control almost every other variable except for color. So for that reason, my paintings got very, very, very minimalistic, and very controlled. And that's still, you can still see, um, trends in that in my work today. Um, and they started to look really good. I started to develop and find my style. And then by the time the exhibition rolled around, I had enough pieces that I was okay with showing. Um, and I wound up winning an award for it. It was apparently the only award that my studio department at my college gives out every year for studio art. And it wasn't necessarily about like winning an award. It was, it wasn't that, but it was more that like I had never been recognized at all ever in my life for anything else other than sports. So it was a weird sort of almost borderline cognitive dissonance moment when I was like, what? This is different. Maybe I have another thing that I'm good at. This is interesting. Um, so yeah, but by that time, it's May of senior year, and I had already accepted a job that would put me on a path towards education, towards being a teacher, and I did that. So I put painting on the back burner for a little while. Um, and then sort of 3 years later, I was feeling this sort of like there was something missing, there was something empty. I wasn't happy. I was kind of depressed. I was just not doing so well. And I was like, I have a job now. I have some income. I have some free time. Like, I think I'm going to start painting again. And that was February of 2020 that
Wow.
I
Yeah.
got the keys to my studio that I have now, right before COVID hit. And weirdly, COVID was, you know, it sort of pushed me into my painting, back into my painting process even more aggressively, right? Because there was nothing else to do. I got really lucky in that sense. So I had all the time in the world to just think about painting, actually paint, figure out if I wanted to make a business out of it. How do I make a business out of it? Let's learn how to do Instagram as a business. So like, so all this time, like I filled all this time that you had. So you could either like uh, ruminate over COVID, or I could sort of learn this new skill, right? A lot of people did this. People learned how to make sourdough. People learned how to,
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
did anything, right, to
Yeah.
fill those moments. And for me, it was a real deep dive into my painting process. And yeah, I think I wrote this to you. It just like it gave me a really good sort of one-on-one with my relationship with painting. And I realized that it was a much stronger, healthier, more authentic relationship that made me feel better than my teaching job. And I'm going to make a difference between my teaching job and my teaching identity here, because the job, while the job wasn't right for me at the time and still isn't, there's still a massive teacher identity. I love teaching. I love being an educator. And I feel like now it's just kind of in my power. Like I'm carrying it out my way through my art practice. Um, so yeah, by the time I made it through a year and a half of teaching through COVID, and it was really hard while also building my art business and art career at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then this past summer, it got so busy. I got so busy and so in demand that I um, kind of had a definite choice to make. I mean, I knew I couldn't do both well, because I'm someone who likes to do things well and put 100% into
Yep.
things.
Yep. Focus.
So I wasn't going to do both halfway.
Yeah.
So I chose the relationship, the the work that felt more authentic and healthy, which was painting. So here I am now, a full-time artist since August, and it's going amazingly well. And I think it's going amazingly well just because I love it. I'm
Yeah.
obsessed with it. It makes me feel awesome, and I feel like I'm, honoring my mom and her legacy all at the same time, which is which is super. I feel like I'm putting that life and that energy and that joy um, back into people's days, lives, weeks, whatever. And that's whether you're just simply watching me on Instagram or if you actually have a piece of mine. Same thing. Even if, and that's why I care so much about, when people walk into my studio and all they want to do is talk. I don't care if you want to buy nothing. That's fine. Let's just have a great talk. That's my favorite thing ever.
Yeah.
Um, Tell me what you're going through. What do you think about this piece? What's it making you feel? How's your day going? That's my favorite part about being an artist, is getting to meet people and connect over over color or paint or art.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious. So, what would you give as advice to, maybe the senior in college, or even, maybe a working professional today? I mean, obviously
Mm,
they're gonna, not in a bad way, but they're gonna kind of be like, oh wow, like in a year and a half, she, February to 2020 to August to 2021,
mhm.
and they'll kind of be kind of not jealous, but you know, um, that's not all that much time, and
Right.
obviously credit to you, but I guess what piece of advice um would you give to an artist looking to try to make it either more of a side business or become a full business?
Um, that you've got to eat a slice of humble pie every day. And what I mean by that is you've got, and this characterized my whole year, and maybe it was fast, but that was my path and my journey, and it was a product of like seriously humbling up and being willing to learn and step outside my comfort zone literally every day. I mean, it was a learning curve to even start posting my paintings online. Like, so if that's where you have to start, that's where you have to start. It's funny. I had a conversation almost exactly like this in my studio with a artist who was sort of really sheepish and shy and like being bogged down by this job that she hated. And we started there. We had this great chat, and I was like, "Okay, well, are you posting?" And she was like, and I was like, "There's your starting point. I
Mm.
see that. I saw it in her face. I was like, that's what makes you uncomfortable. Start there." So, um, it was not easy at all in that sense. Like every day was kind of a new adventure where I'd have to, you know, strap on my bootstraps and put on my big girl pants and, and try
Yeah.
something new or be willing to suck at something at first. Um, and there's still plenty of stuff today that I still am not awesome at. And that's kind of the coolest part of it is you'll always have something to improve on and get better at or try different strategies on. And that's literally all it takes. I mean, if I waited to have everything figured out and all my ducks in a row and everything perfect and the vision, there before I even got the keys to that studio, I wouldn't be here. So I had no idea what would happen when I got that studio. I had no idea what would happen when I first started taking that commission, when I first started posting. I had no idea that House and Garden UK was going to reach out to me. That just happened.
Mm.
Um, so part of my success was me going after stuff. A lot of my success was just learning, and then random opportunities would pop up here or there, and I don't know. But I think central to it all, and my main takeaway is just like you're gonna have to do some learning and humble up like every day.
Yeah. um you talked about finding your style.
Mhm.
I'm curious, was that something that you learned based off of like mentors saying this is what you should do, someone buying a piece and you being like, oh, this is what I should like, how is
That's a
how,
really important question.
yeah.
That's a really good question. Because I'm gonna start with it was absolutely not capital NOT about someone buying it. I didn't even sell my first piece until last year. Um, Never. As tempting as it is, and this is part of separating like ego from stuff, never base your style off of what people buy. Unless it's exactly what feels right in your heart and soul and your creative energy. My style was something that came to me sort of as a result of what I was feeling, what my story was, what I needed, like how I needed to express. And that took a long time to figure out. But it was also partly, I love that you mentioned the word mentor. My professor at the time happened to be wonderful at teaching color and color theory. Bevan Engman, shout out to her. She's amazing. I still keep in touch with her to this day. She's a really important person in my life. She was really there for me too with my loss. She would sit there and listen to me cry and listen to
Yeah.
me talk to her about when I cried. I remember asking her, I was like, so Bevan, The other day I was painting and I just burst into tears like, "Am I normal? Like, is that a like, what's happening to me?" And she was like, "Okay, it just means you're an artist. Like, that just means that this work means something to you. It means that it's important and listen to that and lean into that." Um, so yeah, it I think styles are born out of whatever your experiences are and how you choose to process them. And whatever way that is, even if it's something again that doesn't make sense to society, maybe people will hate it. Maybe people will hate it for years. But if it makes sense to you, that's what you need to be doing. Um, and hell, I mean, you can go on for eons about how many artists' work was never appreciated until, you know, some time. But the key to success, no matter when success happens to you or comes your way, or maybe the people who need your work find you or you find them, is authenticity. Because no matter how many years it takes for someone to appreciate your work or buy your work or whatever you want to happen with your work, um, as long as it's made with authenticity, it'll get seen, and it'll more important than that, it'll be influential to you and your practice. So I think
Yeah.
leading with authenticity is the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything about the studio process um, that you would, give advice on as you look back on your process?
In terms of like
J-
painting
Uh,
technique, anything?
making the jump to it, how to choose the right one, um, how to interact with people. I mean, I don't
Or like
anything.
getting a space?
Yeah.
Finding a yeah, I mean, your space can be anywhere. Like your space, I remember in my first apartment in Boston, my space was a ironing board in the corner of my room. That was my space, and um, it could be your garage, it could be the same room you sleep at, as long as if you have like a different mental space that you can get yourself in before you work. For me, it just I knew that I needed a place for paintings to dry on the wall, and I can't have wet paintings on the wall in my living space. So,
Yeah.
me finding a separate studio um, was sort of what I needed. Um, and it was tricky. It involved a lot of networking. I can't tell you how many. Maybe that should be my like takeaway for an artist that wants to make it. You have to have so many conversations. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I would ask a question to, or ask somebody for their number for oh, do you know this person? Can I have their email? Or random DMs on Instagram to people like really talented people, like
Mm.
being brave and that everyone, you can learn something from everyone. So my studio came from, a few conversations of, starting with a friend of a friend, and then they led me to this person, and they led me to this person, and then I met this person, and then, sometimes it'll be a long road, but if you keep asking authentically and politely and passionately, you'll find where you need to be.
Yeah. The business of art, whether it's, uh, an exhibition, solo exhibition, commissions, um, is this all just things that you learn by trial or, um,
It's all made up.
okay.
What I say
Yeah.
by that is like,
Yeah.
you make it up.
Yeah.
Like, and this is one of the coolest parts of this industry is like, yeah, there might be certain rules that you have to put, but like you make what you want it to be. If you want to take commissions, take commissions. If you don't want to take commissions, don't take commissions. I actually, my business kind of started with taking commissions, and that's what sort of got my name out there, and like how I started to make a little bit of money and all things like that. But going into 2022, I am seriously cutting back on that, almost because it's a comfort zone at this point. And I'm going to allow space for my creative brain to be a little more open and productive. So, what was I talking about? Oh, the business.
Yeah.
Um, so you
Business of
kind of
art.
just, yeah, it's a tricky one, and finding your niche and your niche market and how to market it. Yeah, it takes time, but there's no one way to do it. I think is the major thing, and I think that's as much as I used to complain about how no one teaches you these things, there's kind of a reason for that. And it is because it's always an evolving thing. And it's an evolving thing because artists are evolving. So in other words, we as artists kind of get to indicate what the business of art is. And it's because it's a byproduct of what we decide to make. So
Can can you talk to us about your process? I know you've done like different series.
mhm,
You know, is it just you get in a certain mood, or like you listen to music, or how do you get into,
it's a
I
good
saw the
question.
Shine series, the Flow
Mhm,
Ocean,
mhm.
how do you get into your process?
Um, well, that's a good question. It's something I'm still learning. But yeah, people ask me how I start things all the time, and it just depends either on. I mean, I could be inspired by something literal that I've seen. I could be inspired by just kind of like a mindset. But oftentimes, I kind of get out of my own way essentially and start with just a color that I feel like starting with. And that sounds like a really simple way of just, and it is a simple way of saying it, but it describes something really complex and subconscious, to the point where I don't even understand why I'm starting with orange or starting with blue sometimes,
Mhm.
but somewhere in there in my psyche, either I'm wanting to remember something, or I'm wanting to feel something, or I'm wanting to receive a certain kind of energy, and then just kind of have to roll with it. Um, but yeah, I mean, I get a lot of inspiration from reading. I get a lot of inspiration from nature. And that doesn't mean I see a tree and I want to paint a tree. It means that when I get in nature, it sort of helps me tap back into my humanity and my psyche, and sort of just puts me in a more open mental state of being, um, where I feel like I can, get into that mindful state and make some art, because my process is very sort of meditative and mindful and patient. So if I'm all anxious and stressed out by life things or the city or whatever, like it's going to be really hard to calm down and make those really smooth lines. Um, so my process depends a lot on me being mentally well and stress free. That's why I don't watch the news.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm curious, what's your relationship with confidence? You know, um, if I were to ask you, who you are today versus when, February of 2020,
Mm.
is it just the number of reps, or, are you in a different mental state,
Well,
confidence wise?
it's so
Like,
funny you say that because I actually I was interviewed I think about 4 weeks ago now, and sort of on a similar topic, like how my year has gone, how this whole process has gone. And this person who interviewed me, she knew me about 2 years ago, like before I started this whole process. And I popped on the Zoom screen just like this, and she was immediately like, "You look so different. You are glowing. You are like a totally different human." And I was like, "Wow, thank you. I mean, that means a lot." It definitely feels that way. And it's because I just feel more authentic. And further than that, I feel like validated by being that authentic person. And that's not because I've had all these sales and shows and whatever. It's because I've had the confidence to make my life full of work that makes sense to me. I've like had that confidence to be that person. And that's extremely empowering when you say to yourself, "Hey, you know what? I feel like I am a certain way. I feel like I want to do this kind of work." And you do it, even if it's for 5 minutes a day. You don't have to do it full time. Um, but allowing yourself to be the way you feel compelled to be. I mean, I think that's it. Um, but that's a really good question about confidence because, I mean, just taking that first step, right? That confidence had to come from somewhere. And I think I'm grateful to my upbringing and my support and my family and friends. They've been so supportive with whatever I've really wanted to. pursue my whole life. And I sort of have a taste of what it feels like to succeed from working really hard with sports and stuff growing up. So I had chances to build it growing up, but then definitely building it specifically to my art career was a definite journey, and I'm still building
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So talk to me in another year, and we
Yeah,
can
hey.
see if it gets better.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious, what's the biggest change when you go from a part-time to a full-time artist?
Time management.
Okay.
Learning how to be your own boss, that is a tough one. Because
Yeah.
normally you have your job where, you clock out at 5 and it's like, okay, you're done now. You don't get that as a full-time artist. There's nothing in you that says, okay, you can stop now. So you have to sort of, and this is also something I'm not great at this yet. I'm exhausted right now because I
Okay.
haven't quite learned how to do this yet.
Yeah.
Um, so it's one of my goals of 2022 is setting a bit healthier boundaries, going to sleep at the same time every night, things like that, learning when to fully turn off. I think I'm gonna start with this next week, starting tomorrow. I think I'm gonna take a full, nice, like 5 or days off, whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and people ask me all the time, you just like, do you just do anything you want all the time? And have a yeah, and I'm like, no, I do whatever my, business
Yeah,
brain wants me to do all the time. Sometimes it's really consuming and exhausting.
yeah,
But no, I am really grateful to be here and sort of be learning how to be my own boss. It's great. But it's tricky. So watch
yeah,
out.
yeah. Do you set goals for yourself, or are you kinda just in the
Absolutely.
in the process? Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I have always been a goal setter. I mean, that was something that transferred from my student athletedness. I mean, I was a nut growing up.
Yeah.
I always had these crazy lofty goals and would do these ridiculous things to get after them. So that I think that skill set definitely transferred to me and my art. Um, and yeah, things like making up my own deadlines out of nowhere. No one else is holding me to them but me. I do a lot of that. Um, but I think my relationship with goal setting has also changed because I think we've all learned a lot about adaptability the last 2
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I have a friend who literally had like all of his goals planned out for 2020, like to the month, to the day, to the week, and he literally had to scrap the entire
Yeah.
thing. Because guess what? That's what happens in life. You get a random phone call one day and your mom is gone. What are you gonna do? You get
Yeah.
a call one day that the world is in a pandemic. What are you gonna do? So I guess the moral is we don't have any control. You don't. All you have is your responses and your attitude. And so goals become more of like not necessarily goals to work towards, but like I don't know, consistent daily mindsets and affirmations and like confidence building and I don't know, like things to focus on rather than things to get to or to achieve, I guess.
Yeah. This might be a weird question, but what do you hope for, like, when people see your art? What do you hope that evokes for them?
That's a good question because I know exactly what I want. All I want, and it's my favorite thing to sit in my studio and watch when it happens, and it happens all the time. People walk into my studio and they just almost like forget what they're doing.
Yeah.
They just sort of get a little bit lost. And sometimes I can see it in their faces, like they're remembering something or feeling something. I mean, that's just the best, like, because we get so wrapped up in our day to day, and there's so little that we have to just sort of give us permission to stop for a second, take a breath for a second, introspect for a second, feel for a second, for Christ's sake. Um, but I am like really, really proud to be making work that somehow gives people that permission to do that. So, and whether it leads to a conversation or not, I don't care about. When it does happen and I do get to talk to people about what they're feeling or thinking or experiencing with my art, though I cherish those greatly. Um, But sometimes I can tell that it's happening in front of my eyes just silently, and that's all I hope for. So it's really such a gift.
Yeah. Um, how was, doing your first solo exhibition? Do you have any pieces of advice on that process?
Um, it's a whole lot more work than you think. And when someone asks you to do it in 2 months, ask for more time. Um,
Yeah.
um, no, it was so incredibly cool. Such an amazing experience. But yeah, know what you're signing up for. Ask a lot of questions. Ask too many questions. One of my first bosses, his best piece of advice, and I still listen to it today, is over communicate. Um, so the more you can know literally about everything, about the physical space, about the owner, about the director, about their clientele, about the the physical size of their walls, anything, the lighting, um, parking, everything. Like the more you know, the better. Um, so yeah, over communicate and plan to run out of time. So one of the things I did that actually made the show possible was I pretended that the show was like 2 weeks earlier.
Mm,
So I gave myself like a deadline
yeah.
to finish painting it. And I nearly missed that deadline. But because I did, I had time to problem solve all of the unexpected things that you don't think will happen, but then happen. So, and I don't think that's different than any other work event or major deadline for any other industry. Like it's all about just planning ahead and over communicating and just owning it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I haven't had an art educator on. I'm
Oh,
curious. You mentioned that you like the teaching aspect, but maybe the now that you're free of you know, being employed there. I mean, I guess what would you maybe even for someone that might think it's the right career path for them, what would you say about being an art teacher?
oh man, I loved teach. It was the funnest job. It got a little bit different when COVID hit, but but before that, I just loved it. I mean, you've got to be a very energetic person, which I am, thanks to my mom. She had abundant energy. It was crazy. So you've got to be a people person. You've got to love energy. You have to love kids. If you don't love everything about all that children are, don't do it. I mean, I'm thinking about elementary school here, or
Yeah.
whatever, youth in general. You've got to have a real love for kids. But it is so much fun. And it's so much fun because it's different every single day. And you get to, with teaching art, you get to sort of give kids a chance to learn about like something that makes us human, you know? Like you get to teach that art is a part of just being alive, of being a part of this planet, because we've been doing it since we were cave people. And it's natural and it's something that you have a right to. um, and seeing what kids do creatively is like the most inspiring thing. I got an idea for an entire series based on a little artwork that a kid did once for me. It was so cool. I don't think I actually did that series because I didn't have time,
Mm.
but
Yeah, yeah.
they inspired me like crazy, and they're a big part of the reason why I'm here actually. Because I remember I would show them all these videos of contemporary artists on YouTube or whatever that were working and alive today and doing all this amazing work. And one of them looked at me one time and they were like, "Miss S, you're an artist, right?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm an artist." And they were like, "Then why are you also a teacher?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"Because I love being your teacher, 100%." And that's still true. And they were like, "But being an artist is so much cooler and you can do that. Like, why don't you just do that?" And
The
I was like,
innocent
"You're
mind.
making this really hard."
Yeah.
No, but that kid is awesome. He's going places. Um, but yeah, I think that they are proud of me, and I kind of decided that like I would love to be one of those 4-minute YouTube videos that they see one day, because those were the moments in the classroom that I saw them really light up the most, is when they could like see something in real life that was really happening and inspired by them. And usually they were people that also looked like them. Like that was a huge part of my curriculum, making sure that art and artists was something that was, seen as incredibly diverse and accessible to anyone. Blind artists, disabled artists, artists of every single color and background. So important.
Is titling pieces easy?
No.
No? Okay. Yeah, I have no
Well,
idea.
actually, maybe I shouldn't say that. I mean, sometimes a piece's title is 100% clear to me from the first layer. Like sometimes it just pops out of me. Like, I'm trying to think of a piece. I probably won't. But other times I will sit with a piece for months before the title comes to me. And I think that's because a lot of my pieces are from sometimes very, very deep in my psyche, in my subconscious, in my memories. And sometimes it takes me a really long time to be like, God, what is that about? Or what does that, or maybe it's not from my psyche and just kind of, you know, something that I'm seeing for the future. And I'm like, what do I want this to remind other people of? What do I want this to symbolize? So it you know, but that's just my experience. I mean, for other artists, it could be totally easy and different, but I find it sometimes extremely difficult, and sometimes I just have to title something that possibly isn't quite right. But
Yeah.
oh well.
Is there something else? We talked about a good amount with the art process and giving advice,
Yeah.
um, that I missed out on that you feel like is also something that's valuable.
Um, I'm just trying to think of things that I've already chatted about with people. Um, I don't know. I think we talked about a lot of it. We talked about authenticity. We talked about learning curves and vulnerability. We talked about, I mean, I had a great question one time about, how do you, like, it's expensive. It's expensive to, buy materials and things, to not have any assurance of whether it's going to sell or not. That's a hard part of it, but sometimes you just have to do it.
Mm.
You won't know if you don't try, and if you need materials to try, save up some money. I mean, I was so frugal my first couple of years teaching. I mean, I never spent any money, and people would always ask, like, why don't you treat yourself? Why don't you? And I was like, because I don't know, it just doesn't feel like I know I'm going to want to spend money on something one day. Like, and it's not anything that's in front of my eyes right now. And I was totally right. It was the studio. It took me 3 years, but I finally had enough money to invest in the studio. So, you know, put your money where your wishes are. Um, and if it means just saving up for a while, do it. But yeah, don't worry about if it's gonna sell. If you want to try something, you gotta invest in yourself.
Yeah, 100%. What's the future of Katie Southworth art?
Only time will tell, right? I'm
Okay.
so excited for it. I
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm going into it with a hugely open mind. I have no idea what's coming. All I know is that I'm excited to try all new things. I don't want to make the same mistakes twice. I don't want to have the same experiences over and over. I'm just really looking forward to taking complete ownership of, this new lifestyle of mine, and taking on all new challenges and collaborations and travel, and just seeing what happens. This kind of one day at a time and yes mentality that I've built up over the year and a half have worked out super well. So, do I have any super specific goals? Not at all. I'm just have a goal of just constantly innovating and looking for new, bigger, bigger, better, and take care of yourself at the same time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we'll see,
Awesome.
and have a really good feeling about it. So.
Yeah. Well, Katie, we talked about a good amount. Was there something that you wanted to talk about or impart?
Um, No, I mean, I just am really grateful that you're doing this work. I mean, I know you've been through your own journey and your own losses, and you've done a lot of what we've talked about, kind of like being the change you want to see, doing the work you want to do. And I congratulate you for that. And I'm really grateful to be a part of that. So, I guess I'm just wanting to say thank you. And I hope more people out there, use gratitude and all that to find their own meaningful journeys in life.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting dichotomy, and maybe you feel the same way. But you know, uh, people give me compliments all the time, and then I think back and I'm like, if Pat hadn't died, I wouldn't even be here.
I say that all the time.
Which is a
Yeah.
crazy,
Hmm.
crazy, crazy thought. Because I would never have done any of this if it were not for that.
Hmm.
But as you talked about, we have to live with the variables that are at hand and try to make the best of the situation. And
Totally.
um, so thank you for that. And you didn't talk about it, but I believe a percentage of all of your sales are donated to the American Foundation for
Yeah.
Suicide Prevention, which is an
Yeah.
awesome thing.
Yeah.
Um,
No, that's a huge, huge part of it, and it makes me really happy to be able to do that. That was a portion of my solo show. Went to we the owner of the gallery and I decided to split it between AFSP and a more local Connecticut mental health chapter, and yeah, giving back is a huge part of my whole process. Um, so,
yeah. For people that want to support you, follow you, things like that, what's the best way for them to do that?
yeah, that'd be awesome. I would love to connect with anyone and everyone out there that you know, is interested in art or color or mental health or just joy. And you can find me at Katie Southworth. What is it? Katie Southworth underscore art is my Instagram. And then you can find everything else from there. My website is katiesouthworthart.com. And yeah, I love chatting with everybody online. I'm on Instagram most days. So definitely shoot me a follow. You can subscribe to my email list on my website as well. That's how you'll get like direct notifications about any shows or new releases I have going on. So yeah, I'm excited to meet you all.
Yeah.
Reach out.
Well, Katie, I just want to thank you. As I said before, um, you know, these aren't easy things to talk about. And, I know, um, kind of back to a couple sentences ago, a lot of people give me the credit.
Yeah,
But without the guest speaking about it, these conversations don't get normalized. And,
exactly.
um, I think the resources, um, of having these and really talking about the after effects and what advice we would give to people in the situation,
Mhm.
even being a resource, for someone that's going through a similar situation as this year,
Yeah.
instead of 2015. All of these things, I'm really grateful to you for sharing that and being vulnerable. And I just want to say, just from my personal perspective, just it's awesome that you've taken um such a tough thing and been able to create a full-time business. I don't know if you're able to, I know you're in the process, so and you're very but like to reflect on that, to be like,
Mhm.
every time you sell a painting or something like that, mindfulness, joy, mental health are talked about. Or even if the person doesn't even know that about you,
Right.
a percentage of the sale is automatically donated to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So it's a really really neat thing. um
Mm.
and I wish you the best
Mm.
in your journey.
Thank you. That means a lot. It's a joy to do it. It's I'm so grateful that I'm able to do it. And the goal is to just keep it growing and keep the outreach and the conversations going. That's what it's all about. So thank you for the conversation, and I hope that they continue for you as well.
Thank you.
All right.